Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another CGC show. It's going to be you and I today. We do not have a guest today's session, largely due to my own fault, actually, entirely due to my own fault. I did reach out to someone to invite them onto the podcast, but due to timing, conflict of timing things, unfortunately, they couldn't join us, but maybe another session. So it's just going to be you and I. And I was thinking about topics to talk about. And I thought that seeing as we have, in general, I think more of a focus on recording ourselves for a variety of reasons these days, that we might be just interesting to go inside a couple of audio editor and a video editor. And I want to show you inside that process. This isn't going to be a tutorial of how to use this program per se, but I wanted to, shine some light on the process, some of the tools we use to change sound, to edit, all that kind of thing. And it might inspire you to delve into your own interface that you might have at your disposal. So that's going to be the focus today. We're just going to have a little bit of a look at the editing process of both video and audio. I have largely been self-taught is always a bit of a term with an asterisk, because I've benefited from a lot of people who put educational material out there, So I really looked at a lot of YouTube videos, and I don't know if I read any books or what have you, but and also many of you know I actually worked as a professional photographer for many years, so I was used to some of these tools. But in any case, the information on how to use all of these tools is readily available. You do have to sometimes do a little bit of digging through some YouTube videos of good quality or lesser quality, and have some patience there to figure those out. But I think once you start to understand the general concepts, it's very achievable. And I think programs, especially made by companies like Apple, for instance, are increasingly focused on the end user experience, trying to make it as easy and as seamless as possible. So that's just a little precursor to today's topic. So yes, and we have some people saying it's good timing, and I hope that I can offer. I'll definitely leave a big chunk at the end for Q&A, because I think this might be a good session to answer some questions that might be sort of a little bit tangential, how to upload to YouTube and things like that. But we're going to start out with just some basic editing concepts. So hello to everyone. And yes, Judy's saying it's a very timely topic for us at CGC, because we have our duet challenge coming up in November. Good grief, time is flying. So we have one more week of the CGC show, and I think it's just perfectly timed. I think next Thursday, which will be the last episode, will be myself with Dave Belcher, Nikki Tedesco, and James Erickson, and we're going to have a roundup of exam feedback. A lot of the exams that people submitted in September have started going out, the responses, so you're going to see some people sharing that in the forum. For those who wanted to share their feedback that could benefit others, that's great. You don't have to, but it's always very useful. One thing I will request, if you did do an exam and you got a response, I just ask maybe writing to the person who put in the time and effort to give the response, just, either acknowledging the receipt of the email or maybe saying thank you, because there is a huge amount of time and effort that goes into these, obviously on your part as well. And we recognize that. We recognize that by putting in time and effort to respond to you. But it's sometimes funny when we send out like 40 or 50 responses, which might, warrant 40 or 50 hours of work. And sometimes we only get a few emails back acknowledging receipt or saying thank you. It really does mean a lot to the teachers. None of them have said anything to me at all, but it does mean a lot when we just get a little note of like, thank you so much. I'll take these on board and moving forward. And counterintuitively, I suppose, maybe or maybe not, the exams that we put the most effort into are unfortunately the exams where we don't pass somebody. And the reason is, if we're not passing someone, we actually often consult one another multiple times in some instances to just go, do you agree with this assessment, and what do you think we should do here? So yeah, so even if you didn't pass or you asked to resubmit, know that we took great care and time thinking about the best way forward for you as a performer, as a player. So thanks to the teachers for all their work so far. We're getting there. I'm the one lagging this time. I've been a little overwhelmed by a variety of things, but Dave, Nikki, and James have been doing an outstanding job. Outstanding. So, hello to everyone. Thank you everyone for saying hello. Shall we dive in? So, I want to start with, first of all, we're going to talk about the concept of the idea of sort of a chain in recording. I'm going to start with audio. And I think visualizing a chain is really good, because when we get into these digital formats, we don't have even sometimes a visual cue as to where the linking of each item is. I think in the analog days, when you see those big recording desks, at least then you can kind of see one row. You know how you've seen those big recording desks maybe in movies or documentaries, and you've got a strip line after line after line of little dials and sliders. That represented one track, and you could kind of see what was going on that individual track. Now, when we get into digital audio interfaces, or workspaces, DAWs they call them, they will often, it's hard to follow the line of what's happening to the audio. So in terms of a chain, the very first thing that affects the chain is you. And that's your time and effort that's been put into the study of the music, and it's your practice and all that work and all that that time that comes into that very moment where we record something for posterity. You could argue it goes back further than that with, you know, the composer or the person who commissioned the composer, etc. But let's just start with the moment of we are there and recording. So you are the first part of that chain. The next part in the puzzle is your instrument. In this case, it's the classical guitar for most of us. And that is going to obviously affect the sound dramatically, your instrument. So when we're talking about the things that are going to affect your sound the most of all, those are going to be the biggest, you and your instrument. Just like in photography, the most important thing is the subject. Following on from that, we get the next thing in the chain goes from your instrument to the air between your instrument and the microphone. And that incorporates your acoustic space as well. So your acoustic space, whether you be in a cathedral, whether you be in a bathroom, or whether you be in a small second bedroom in a New York apartment, that's all going to affect what happens to the sound before it gets to the microphone. We often think of this as resonance, or in the case of a digital world, reverb. So the sound will be changed through that process. We've got you, the instrument, the air, the acoustic space. Then we have the microphone. This is something often people are concerned with first and foremost in this process, but as you can see, there's already three things that are incredibly important prior to that. Then it goes through the cables, and I guess you could argue that would be part of the process if we start getting into audiophile world. Then we get into the processing itself in the digital world, and even post-processing, which means after the sound is recorded, we can start to play around with the sound and add artificial reverb, or we can boost and change the EQ, compression, a limiter. All of these sorts of things can affect the sound after the fact. And that does play a big role as well. So there's this chain of events that happens when it comes to audio. I'd like to start off with, let's see what, okay. Let's dive to the screen share, shall we? Let me just bring up this. Okay, it should work. Yeah, so I'm here. You can hear me, you can see the screen, great. So I this is a program called Adobe Audition, and this is just an interface. The interesting thing about audio is that you're dealing with ones and zeros in the digital realm. So the program that you use, whether it be Adobe Audition or Audacity, which is a free audio program, or Reaper, or what do you have on Macs? I don't know, like QuickTime or something, or Logic. there's all these different programs, but what they're doing is still dealing with ones and zeros. So the program will not affect the quality of sound. The interface will affect the way you work with that process. It's going to make it easier or more familiar or less so, but it's not going to affect the sound. It's just ones and zeros. So a free program compared to Pro Tools, which is a very high-end program, they're going to have different interfaces and different capabilities, but they won't change the sound. And what we do when we're recording these days is we're doing something they call non-destructive editing, which means this here, this is referencing a file that is a recording of this audio. And that file exists on my external hard drive. And when we're playing around with it here, if I do this, right? If I go chop, chop, delete, move around, change this, oops, I deleted. That's fine, because all we're doing is referencing that audio file. And if we decide, oh, let's go back, zoop, there it is. We didn't really do anything to the actual file. That's why it's called non-destructive editing. It's a really wonderful thing. So we can always go back and start over again, and we're not actually affecting the file, as if compared to, let's say, one of my favorite examples is the recording that the band Queen did of Bohemian Rhapsody, where they layered their voices, so they got that operatic quality in Bohemian Rhapsody. And by the end of that process, an anecdote was that the tape, the old, I don't know if it was probably thicker than a normal cassette tape, but anyway, it was see-through by the end of that process because they'd gone over it so many times. And that's a process there. It's sort of, it's, I guess, destructive editing, as opposed to this, where we have a lot of flexibility. Okay, so first and foremost, let's give the lay of the land here. And again, this is going to be maybe different to your program, but the functions are all the same. So we usually have over here on the left a sort of repository of our files that we're going to be using. They can live over here, and we can sort through them for quick access. Up here, this is our sort of effects bay. You've got little buttons here to turn the effects on and off. And this might be similar in an analog situation of all those little tubs, those little pots that people would turn on an old recording desk. That's what they would be. And that's what I mean, that this is sort of becomes very abstract in terms of seeing what effect is happening where. Over here, we've got, these are the individual tracks we're working with. And so we can do things like make it a solo, so we only hear that track, or mute other tracks. We can record it, and then you can see my voices going through there. All sorts of things. You can tell the program what microphones to listen to and all that sort of jazz. There's plenty more to think about, but that's, that's what we're working with. And these brightly colored things here, these are the waveforms of the audio. So it's got a visual representation of what's going on in that audio track, and you can stretch them out so it's a bit more clear. You can make them small. If you've got, let's say, pop music or orchestral recordings, might have lots and lots of tracks that they're recording on from different microphones. Here you'll see that there's 2 lines of audio. That is because we're dealing with a stereo file. Stereo simply means that we've got 2 sound sources based on the left and the right speakers, as opposed to mono, where we only have 1 sound source, and opposed to the other extreme might be 5.1, where we have, 5 speakers and a subwoofer, and so there's actually 5 pieces of information going into that. So that's giving you a bit of a lay of the land, and you're going to find this similar kind of outlay in all these different interfaces all over the shop. Okay, so let's go into a couple of basic things. All right, so I'm going to just solo this. Here we have, this is one of the recording from the recent project where I recorded the vast majority of the pieces in the graded repertoire book. One of the most basic things we're going to be doing with these files, the most common things, is chopping them up, basically. Because if we had, let's say we've got these let's say these were 3 different takes. We played it once, great. We played it twice, oh, that was a little better. We played it 3rd time, oh, the beginning was good, but the end was a bit of a mess, right? Then we do things like this where I'm just going to use this little razor tool. I'm going to chop out this, get rid of that, and then, replace it with this. And then suddenly we're starting to develop Frankenstein's monster. So we're taking the best bits of the different takes to make a version that we're really happy with. Now, if you've never worked with one of these, it is incredible, the detail. So I'm pressing my plus key here. I'm going to zoom in on my cursor here, right? We get all the way in. I'm zooming in to this moment, and that is right there, the beginning of a note, right? And what I can do to such a degree of detail, I could just go chop, and you can see visually, there's the attack of the next note. Perfect, right? Now it's quite, I wouldn't say easy, but it's on the easier side for guitar because we have a percussive attack. So that's one note, cut, and then maybe I like this note out of the other take, and we go cut, and we put it in there. Magic, right? And this is how we can come up with such pristine recordings that seem almost impossible sometimes. Now, what can happen is if the cut is sometimes, this one's a pretty clear one, right? We could visually see that note, the amplitude fluctuating there. And there's the attack of the note and then the decay. John, as a funny comment, John said, I think the next grade submission is sorted, as in he's going to have an editing frenzy. Well, I'll teach you some sneaky ways, John. That was very funny. Now, what we can do here is if I start to overlap these two, you'll see these lines come across here. We can just cut this and then right at the beginning of the note, start that new sound file from a different take, and it will sound pretty seamless, actually. But if we want to be really slick, most of them do it automatically. You used to have to do this manually, but this is called a crossfade, where you see that line going down. That means that first audio file fades away as the second file fades up. So you will find that you can make these transitions absolutely seamless, really undetectable to the ear. Let me give you an example. I know I've been talking all about this. So what I'm going to do, because this is the same piece and the same take, I'm going to recompose a piece for you. And we'll make it sound like it was just meant to be, right? So we've got, let's have a listen. Okay, so let's pretend, right, that note that very last note we heard, I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to use my little razor blade, chop. I'm going to make an edit there. I'm going to zoom back out. And then let's see, I'm going to put it in another spot. All right, and there I can see that's about to be the downbeat of the next measure. I can see clearly there's the beginning of that note. Boom, all right. So I put 2 little cuts in the tape there, so to speak. I'm going to take out what I assume is 4 beats here, and let's have a listen to what it sounds like. I'm recomposing. Apologies to Mr. Bach. It's just a demonstration. I'm going to try and do it without the crossfade now and see what it sounds like. It's going to sound a little weird, but we're listening to the connection. Right? So compositionally, it sounds odd, but audibly, it's fine, right? It doesn't sound like it's did something strange. Now, to get just to kind of show you what happens in real recording situations, in that moment, the note after the edit sounded soft. Did that sound soft to you? It sounded uncharacteristically soft compared to the notes that preceded it. So let's have a... So if we wanted to make the contour of that phrase a little more compelling, I'm going to just chop here at this other note right afterwards. You can see a nice loud one there. But it's this one that I'm concerned with. So by dragging this little guy here, look at the amplitude. I'm actually increasing the volume here. So I'm going to try and match it a little bit more to what's around it. I put it up by 7 decibels, and let's see what we've done just to that one little note. Okay, yeah, I'll take it. Now, obviously, we're just messing around here, but you can really play around with finessing how this works. Yeah, I think that's more convincing for our recomposition there. So this is an example. Imagine you had one take, and there was just one little note, and it's like, oh, it's a little too soft or a little too loud. You can actually play around with the amplitude just of that one note. Amazing, isn't it? So this is also, in terms of, even if you're not interested in audio editing right now, this is giving you an insight into what goes on in those recordings that seem so pristine from all those plays you listen to, and you're like, I'll never play like that. Well, you know what? They never did either. The recording's one thing and the playing's another. Okay. So that's the bulk, actually, of sort of what you'd be doing. You'd be chopping up pieces and taking bits of other takes. One strategy that I like most of all is, let's say, like here, let's say we did 3 takes of a piece. That's exactly what I did for all these Yale recordings. I played each piece 3 times, and then you just choose the favorite. Now, what I like to do as a strategy, you don't have to do this, but is I choose my favorite take as a whole. And then let's say it's the green one, the top one. And then if there's any little bits, you go through and you mark on the score, or that note, or this little buzz there, whatever. And then I see if I can find a clean or a better version of it in the other takes. And then I just start slotting them in, like fixing up the little bits, right? And that way you keep the holistic nature of that first full take. And then you just fix up the little blemishes, right? So that's an approach. Of course, you can completely just mix and match if you like. You take the ending of one, the beginning of another. But I particularly like this approach where you just take one full take, your favorite one as a whole, and then you fix up the little bits and pieces. Because I think there is something a little bit undefinable but recognizable about a holistic performance. Just my approach there. Now, things I want to go through. Okay, so that's now. So I want to. We talked about the chain, right? We talked about the chain. We've got. Let me just clean this up so it's not going to get confusing. Remember, non-destructive. There they are, back again. We talked about the chain, and I said it's you first and foremost, then your instrument, then the air, then the microphones. So if we're talking about giving our best opportunity on the day. You, as being the first part of that chain, you want to be prepared, organized, want to have slept well, and be, as least take away the most amount of stress you can. Easy said than done. Then your instrument, you want to have your instrument in good condition, good strings in a good place, in tune, all that jazz. Now, these recordings are a good example here of the next part. This is the air, right? Sort of, the air on the microphone. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I would like you to tell me, they're very subtle, which one, I'm going to play excerpts of all 3, which one you liked best, all right? So for number 1, here we go. Had to let it play to that note. I love that note. When it, one of the all-time great notes. All right. Now, this is the all-time great notes. All right. Had to let it play to that note. I love that note. That note. One of the all-time great notes. All right. Now, number 2. Okay, pretty subtle difference, but we'll talk about what actually was different in a bit. Now this one, you can see the amplitude's much lower. We'll talk about that as well. So I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to make a change, but have a listen. All right, so which did you like best? First, second, or third? And maybe why, if you can talk about it. So in terms of the amplitude, whilst people are writing some answers there, this is affecting some artificial gain, right? We're making the sound louder. Well, loud is probably a loaded word there, but it's basically getting louder. And the reason is that there wasn't enough signal in the initial recording, so we're having to artificially boost it after the fact. This is usually to do with the settings. Okay, so we've got some people answering. So yeah, basically, so Carrie asked that she had one question: why some recordings have a lower amplitude? As a photographer, I'm sorry if I'm mixing my metaphors or worlds here, but as a photographer, they always say it's best to get it right in the camera because you do a lot of things at post-processing in Photoshop and everything. But I think as a good photographer, you want to be able to get the photo as, you know, with the right settings, the right lighting and white balance and everything in the camera, as in not waiting to Photoshop to fix that up. So here, this was a case, I think, of the settings were not right in the moment of recording. The gain was too low, and you can visually see it. I'm putting it back down to reset it back where it was. You can just visually see it, right? Too low. You can boost that, but the thing is, if you listen to that third take as you boost it, listen to the other sound you get in there. And just before I play, listen. That's noise. That's a noise floor. So if you don't get it right at the point of recording, you boost all of the amplitude, yes, but you're also going to be boosting that little noise floor, something called a noise floor, and you get that little hissing sound. So it sounds can sound warm to some people because it reminds you of LPs and whatnot. But all right, so we've got Carrie said she liked the third one. Linda said she liked the third. Joseph said the second or the third. David mentioned the third had lots of background noise. John said the first. Richard said the second. Let me see if I can do this really quick. I want to show you. I did put hang on. Let me just come back. Hi. While I pull this up, let me just see if I can get to CGC. Oh, I can see myself on a live stream already. I know because I did a little video that I put up quite a while ago, so I have to dig back and find it. From the hall. And a little sort of, hey, I just recorded this. Have a look what was going on. Can I find it? Can I find it? Dave, if you find it before me, maybe you could pop it in. So many videos. Wow, we've created a lot of videos at CGC. Okay, hang on. Give me 2 more seconds. I think it'll be interesting for you to see. So what I want to show, oh wow. Oh. What I want to show you is give you an idea of where the microphones were placed. Getting there, getting there. Here we go. Great. All right, here we go. All right. So let me share my screen again. All right. So I'll just play this video. Ribbon mics, you know, I don't know. I'm not super experienced with ribbon mics, but They operate with a different mechanism. Maybe you can have a look up on Wikipedia or what have you. But they sound really, really lovely with classical guitar. They have a certain warmth and remind me of the old school Segovia recordings, because that's the kind of microphones they'd be using. There are also up here, these are little, very discreet microphones, but they're Sheps. And they look so discreet and small because they have a new design actually where the electronics of the system is in the cable, like it's not, so it doesn't have to be a long sort of pencil type microphone. And then over there is my other camera. That's what I use to grab my right hand. Tricky thing is having to grab a focus point and then make sure you sit back in exactly the same position every single time so that the right hand will be in focus. All right, so I feel that covers the microphone portion. So you saw that there was two sort of gold, very majestic looking microphones. Those were pretty close. And then those two Sheps microphones, they're spelled SCHOEPS. It's just a brand name. They were further up, right? And I talked about in that chain between your instrument and the microphones, there's the air. So the difference, the big difference between these takes, between this yellow one and this, what color is this one? Purple one and the green one, is that the purple and the green have much more of the Sheps. So we had 4 microphones recording this. And what you can do is increase the amount, how much you're hearing from the different sets of microphones. So just again, this third one, these are mainly the gold ones with a little hint of the Sheps, which pick up more of the space. Right? And now we have introducing more influence from those Sheps microphones. Very big difference. It sounds like the guitar is much further away. So there's also kind of a spatial element that comes into this process where it distances you, and you can do that with panning left and right as well. You can sort of make it sound like the performer is in a different place in reference to you. So it's a big, big difference there. And what you'll be amazed by is you're hearing it through all sorts of speakers right now, but some of you through headphones, some of you through iPhones, whatnot. But as you go through different speakers, you're going to hear different effects. Like, oh, that sounds great. And then you hear it in headphones, you're like, ugh, I can hear all the clicks of the nail and the background noise. And so that's part of the process, is listening through the audio through different ways. Now, so that's a good example of the air there. Now, I just want to introduce you to a couple of other concepts. So I believe the difference between this, let's have a listen. Right, and this. There's a difference between those two. That, I believe, is the same balance of the 4 microphones, right? The same space and the same closeness. And what's happening there is the changing of EQ. Now, EQ is a good example of, we talked about the chain, and there's some comments coming up about, oh, I'm stuck with this microphone. I want to talk about that, because if you consider the chain, there's a lot that you have going for you that you have at your control. But coming back to this, in this chain, right, we've got the performer, we've got the instrument, we've got the air, we've got the microphone, the cables, and now we've got post-processing. So if I take this track here, and I'm going to put in some EQ, right? And this is 30 bands. So basically what we're saying is there's all these different frequencies we can play around with, and I'm going to have 30. So we really can get very specific here. So guitar range, well, guitar goes throughout, but we can really start mid ranges and mid to low ranges really start to affect things. So this to me sounds a little like this, right? It sounds a little woofy. So we might want to push some of these, this is sort of mid to high tones here. And let's see what that little bump does. No, I don't like that. This is going to sound weird, but I just want to show you the sound world. getting crazy now. It's like through a telephone. How do we reset? Let's just whatever, do something else. So we'll bring up more trebles. Maybe it's living more in the trebles. Now all of this is very rough. Now, but it has taken away this sound, right? It's suddenly become a bit clearer. We want to go to sort of Segovia world. Anyway, as you can see that there's that chain, but the post-processing, I mean, this is a real craft, a real art. People have careers just as the master to master recordings, which is just playing around with these and really understanding what's going to affect certain things. So, but these two tracks, the top two, were examples of Benjamin up at Yale, not Ben Verdery, another Ben, who was doing some editing for us. And these were two choices. And sort of Nikki and I went back and forth. I think we ended up agreeing on this middle one here. But they're good examples. That's just EQ. Now, because I still, maybe we'll just have to end it on audio. I don't know if we can even get the video. I always run out of time. I want to introduce you to compression, limiter, and reverb. Maybe not limiter so much. Okay, compression. Compression is an interesting one to understand. In classical music, we have a lot of variability in terms of the dynamics, right? That's one of the things that we're very much in the world of. Dynamics is softs and louds and the shaping of phrases. Now, when you come to compression, this means we've taken all of that variability in the dynamic range, and we're going to squash it. And usually we're squashing it up to the maximum that we can get. Now, this may sound technical, but you experience it every time you watch TV. So have you ever noticed, it's not as common for me to experience this, but it used to be much more common, where you'd be watching a TV show, you're like, great, so the appropriate volume, and I'm happy. And then the ads come on, and you're like, whoa, turn it down. Why did it get so loud all of a sudden? Well, it didn't get loud. What happened was they compressed all the audio, so everything, even the softest thing, is at its maximum volume, right? And that's also what they do in a lot of pop music and other genres. So, and that's also why if you went from a classical music radio station, you're hearing an orchestra with dulcet tones and very soft and shimmering, and then suddenly you go over to a pop station, it's like, bam, you didn't realize the volume was so high. That's why, compression. Now you can use that. I use it for my podcast to make sure that the voices are at the same level. It's great if you've got one person's a little softer in the interview and then you're a bit louder and you don't want to have that imbalance, so you just use compression to bring both of them up. And it's a bit rough and ready, but it does the job. So just do broadcast is a nice strong one. Here you can see in the bottom here, this is the compressed version, so you're going to see a before and after. Everything's just brought up. So if we turn it on and off in the process, we can hear it suddenly jump in volume. On. So it can be a good tool to use. You don't have to always have it on full ball, or you can have it in between to subtly change it. Another thing is a limiter. I'm not going to go into it too much. It has a similar effect. Basically, if you ever get a recording that you've got the settings a bit wrong, maybe your guitar's really close to your iPhone or whatever, and it comes out all buzzing and crackly, it might sound a little bit like this. Sorry, I should have warned you before doing that. But anyway, I'm going to play again. You get the idea. The limiter stops it doing that. It's called clipping. When it goes too loud, so loud that it distorts, that's called clipping. And that's often why you don't want to see the red. See the red over here? It's gone, whoa, whoa. And you have to wait for me to click them off. That's called clipping, and you want to avoid that. And a limiter will actually stop you from ever crossing that line. But again, at the same time, it compresses it a little bit because you're squashing the dynamic range. The other big one is reverb. Now, reverb is a way to, yes, sorry everyone, I'm saying it was loud, I apologize. I should have known better. Well, see, you jumped out of your seat. That's exactly what the advertisements, the commercials on TV wanted you to do when those ads came on. They wanted you to take your attention, which is incidentally why they have those big tutti orchestra hits at the beginning of overtures in opera. They go ba-ba. It's because they wanted to stop people chatting, as they did in very socializing operas, not like it is today, and then they would bring their attention to the opera. That's why they have it's just like ads on the TV. The more the world changes, the less it changes. Now, what was I talking about? Reverb. Okay, so we have our example on the third track. Now, this is a little space, a bit of the hall that you can hear in there, but we might want more. So that gets into the world of reverb. May not play back in real time. Okay, so here, look, this is not where you want to go. You can, people spend a lot of money on reverb. So let me first just put it on so you know what I'm talking about. This is not a great example. Sure. So just a little, yeah, okay, whole. Right? So now it's adding digitally an effect to simulate what it'd be like to play in a very big hall, very spacious with lots of reflections of the sound waves. And there are many programs out there that they've actually gone to famous music halls like, Carnegie Hall or Wigmore Hall or the Music Verein, and they've digitally sampled the reflections and measured all of those so that you can imitate your sound in those halls. It's quite a lot of fun. And this works very, very well if you take a dead recording. So if you are in a space that has bad acoustics, one of the better options you have is to actually completely deaden the room so that there's no reverberations, no reflections at all. And then you can manipulate the sound, because if you've got a little bit of natural acoustic space, then it kind of gets a bit of a mess, right? It gets a bit of a mix. But if it's completely dead, then you can control all the aspects of the sound, and that's where you can get quite a lovely spacious sound out of a very unflattering acoustic environment. So look, I'm gonna field some questions because I had stuff on video as well, but I think this was probably enough to focus on. So this is just a general overview of audio recording. Hopefully it's maybe inspired you to dig in a little bit more and learn about your own user interface. Maybe given some insight into how recordings are edited and made. So I see some questions and I want to go back and let me go in reverse actually. So Linda asked, what makes a, oops, that's not Linda. Linda asked, what makes a dead space? So if you are in your room right now, if you clap, you can hear they might be short, they might be, if you're in a cathedral by any chance, they might be long, but there are reflections that come off hard surfaces. However, if you've ever seen a recording studio and they've got padded stuff on the wall, sometimes they're squares with foam, sometimes they use old egg cartons, sometimes they use pillows, blankets, what have you, all over the place. It absorbs sound. And maybe you can have fun after this, go have fun. And walking around wherever you are and just clapping and listening to the reflections or saying something and listening to how the sound behaves in that particular space. Is it different if you close the window? Is it different if you You know, a really good example of a dead space, and you can just freak out your partners and people you live with. Just go inside the closet and start talking. Go inside a closet with clothes in it, and that's a very dead space. That's an example of a dead space. So if you take the guitar in there, it actually doesn't sound very good to you at the time. One of the challenges of recording in a dead space is it seems less musical. In a reverberant space where there's a long delay or acoustic reflection, it feels more luscious. It sort of washes over everything. And so it actually makes you play differently. So, yeah, Rick was saying that, you know, some producers, while recording guitarists and loud also use reverb plugins as well. Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, that people get to a very, very high level with this. Or, you know, it doesn't have to be someone's career, but you can spend a lot of time learning the tweaks. I'm personally just very rough and ready, and I've once employed a mastering person to do the bluegrass album that I did once with some people, because the more instruments you've got, guitar by itself is on the easier side, but the more instruments you have, the more variables you have to play around with. Okay, so I'm going to go back and look for some questions. So David asked, do you master your own recordings or do you give it away to someone with unbiased ears? I think most people, if they have the good fortune to have someone listen to it, they often ask second opinions. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? It is good common sense to go and listen to your recording if you're making an album in a like bad. They're all pretty good these days, but car stereos, earbuds, big audio headphones, computer speakers, all this kind of stuff. Listen to it in different situations. Yeah, Al was saying, you know, 4 microphones. So yeah, you can really go to town. You know, if you ever watch, maybe you can Google a video of an orchestra being recorded, but they'll have many, many microphones. Sometimes every single instrument is mic'd up so that you can manipulate. What it does is it gives you more flexibility. It means, you know, if you're not going to use artificial reverb and you've got those 2 Sheps mics that we looked at, what you're doing, if you're just pushing them a bit louder, all you're really doing, you're adding reverb to the mix. So it's actually a really nice, natural way to affect that sound, the wash of the acoustic space. How much hall do you want? How much of direct guitar sound do you want? Because if it's all direct, oh, there it is. If it's all just guitar, you're going to hear, and very close, you hear nail clicks, you hear the squeaks more, all that sort of stuff. Whereas the more space you bring in, if it's reverberant, can give it a bit more of a, it's kind of like Vaseline on the camera lens, you know, it's a little more kind. Yeah, and John's saying microphone placement is critical to a good sound and is a real art. Absolutely. There's a really interesting recording done by GSI. I think Kai Narezo was part of that, and David Collette and Mark Teichholz. And they recorded in GSI. You know, many of you seen these videos from the studios, and they actually got Mark Teichholz to play, I think, 18 different guitars, 18 different pieces, and they mic'd every single guitar differently. They experimented until they found a sweet spot, and then that was that album. It's a really interesting album, but a true testament to the experimentation you need for each space and instrument. And once one of those variables change, we need to rethink the placement. John, you're on a roll today. You must have been looking at the empty audience. That was funny. And more cowbell. Okay, I'm trying to sift through and find questions. Oh yeah, so Lucienne, I think some people have answered, but yes, that is a little excerpt from the BWV 1056. It's in grade 4, I believe. Yeah, Linda, just to confirm, a dead space is really about this very little reflection back of sound. The only time I've been in a completely dead space is when I was getting my hearing tested. My uncle back in Australia, he's an ENT, an ear, nose, and throat doctor. And in those booths where they test hearing, they're completely silent and you hear like your ears ringing. It's a very weird experience. That's a true dead space. So usually even a cupboard full of clothes is going to have some kind of reflection, but far less. Maybe if you had any questions, could you write them again? Sometimes there's a lot of chat that goes on in these sessions, so it's very hard to sift through and find questions from before. Oh, here's a question. Is it better to record somewhere with natural reverb or in a small room with no reverb and add post-production? So that's a great question. I would always personally opt for a great acoustic space, but they are hard to come by. So this space, that's a Sprague Hall at Yale. Yes. That's a beautiful space visually. And also because of my connection with Ben Verdery, and I used to go there as a student, I had the ability to go in there and record. But actually, it's not the greatest hall for guitar, to be honest. Different halls, even though they might be great, and beautiful, like smaller halls are usually very good for guitar. So Wigmore Hall was a beautiful hall. I used to work there as an usher. And Angel Place in Sydney as well. I used to work there as an usher. So I used to play late at night. The boss would let me play on the stage. And certain halls just have a beautiful size and shape for guitar. Sprague is not one of them. Sprague is actually really exposing, and almost all the guitarists in the department who've played over the years will tell you that. Let me see. Ron saying, might be good to have some practical suggestions for making exam submission recordings more listenable, but without editing or effects, of course. Yeah, that might have to be another time, but I would say generally what you're looking for is you're going to need some distance between you and the microphone. If you put your guitar too close to an iPhone or what have you, it starts to distort pretty easily. The problem with answering a question like that, Ron, is that, and answering all these questions technology-wise, there's so many variables. You could talk about recording with your phone, but then someone says, well, I have an iPhone, or I have an iPhone 6 or a 12, or I have an Android, or, I have a flip phone Nokia. But they're all going to have their little idiosyncrasies, and that's a real challenge when teaching technology. In general, you want to just have a little bit of distance, and I would say actually the best thing you can do is experiment. You have to be sometimes a little organized with it. So let's say you put your phone on the music stand, and you try it once directly in front, 6 feet away, once to the left, 6 feet away, and once to the right, 6 feet away. And then listen back, do just 10 seconds, play the same thing each time, and then compare and contrast. And then if the left, center, right variable, you picked one, okay, the center sounded best, then maybe start experimenting with distance. 3 feet away, oh, it distorted because it was too, those phones and things have auto gain control. So it freaked out, basically, it was too close. So maybe 6 feet, maybe 12 feet. Oh, that's too boomy. All those sorts of things. So you have to be a little scientific, a little spreadsheety sometimes. Sometimes you can, and of course the height. If you ever watch videos of Norbert Kraft recording, he does a lot of recordings for the Naxos series, you'll see him break out a tape measure. So he goes to the same holes and he's got his measurements written down, like the height of the microphones, the spacing of the microphones, where to put the guitarist. So once you've figured it out, you've kind of figured it out, depending on your space, your equipment, and you. So that would be my best suggestion in general, is use the equipment you've got and then experiment. Martha asks, any suggestions of those of you using a small microphone? I use a Shure MV88 with my iPhone. Yeah, look, again, think about the chain of that audio process. So again, you are going to affect the audio the most. Then your instrument, then the acoustic space, then the microphone. So my first suggestion when dealing with equipment that you think, oh, I'm being held back by that equipment, my first suggestion would be to think about the other three. Get your playing as prepared and as polished as it can be. Make sure the guitar is like new strings and ready to go. And then the acoustic space is going to make more of a difference than that microphone will. Honestly, with all the fancy microphones available, we have better equipment available to us than a lot of the great performers in the early 20th century. Like little microphones that we might think are pretty dodgy are great. You know, they can really do amazing things. So those first three parts are actually, I would consider, more important. Then again, same sort of answer as for Ron, then experiment. Once you've got those three variables figured out, then start experimenting with location. I can't tell you how many experiments I've done with especially visual camera positioning in these little rooms to find just the right spot, and then microphone stuff as well. Another thing to take into context as a generalization, if you go and listen to some recordings, and if you're contrasting and comparing the sound, you will find some of them like, ooh, I don't like that sound. But I guarantee you, if you listen to it after 10, 15 minutes, you forget the sound, you start listening to the recording. I will not name some recordings, but there's some recordings by absolutely phenomenal, world-class, the biggest names, players, and the sound is terrible. And it's amazing, especially if you're trying to search for a sound you want to imitate or contrast and compare. But we really don't care after a while. I think if we're doing, A/B comparisons, then we can start to get very critical. But honestly, if you stay with an album, we worry these days about background noise and hiss. But go and listen to some old recordings. Go and listen to Barrios on wax cylinders or Your Bet, and we don't care. We're blown away by that it's them, that it's the way they're playing the music, that we're listening to something captured so long ago. All of those things, trump the experience of having superior audio quality. And likewise, you can have the best setup in the world and put the player in front that isn't prepared, nothing's going to help it. So that's why I'm talking about that chain of audio. Harvey, maybe next Tuesday I can talk about video because I sort of ran out of time today. Yes, I've talked about that on a podcast, sort of a bit of the philosophy about where we are today. I'll talk about that next time. I think I'll do that next Tuesday, seeing as people seem interested in this topic. Duffy asked, is echo and reverb the same? So echo in the audio editing world is kind of like called delay often. And you can change all the variables. So usually with an echo in the natural world, you get one reflection, you go echo, echo, and then it keeps diminishing each time. But with delay, you can tell the computer, no, I want every reflection to be the same. So I can go echo, 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 echo. And some people use that to like layer sounds. Reverb is more about recreating a natural acoustic space. It's things they call reflections and the way they sort of become diffuse. So it's not a direct repetition of the sound that then diminishes. It's sort of, a more diffuse sound. So they are different. There's a word being bandied about, numpty. I think I have to look that one up. Can you do this with GarageBand? Yeah, so just to reiterate a point from way back in the beginning, when you're dealing with audio, you're dealing with ones and zeros in a digital world. So the interface is going to be different. You probably can do different types of things and different effects and different quality of effects, but you can definitely sort of chop up the sound. And the interface in terms of how accurate you can be with your chop and slice, that also gets affected by the interface you're using, but you should still be able to do the same sorts of things. Okay, so it looks like I think I've gotten to most of the questions. I apologize if I missed any out, but it is 5:01. Time flew. Would you like me to talk about video for next Tuesday, and then we can have our chat with the team on Thursday? Just let me know quickly in the chat. But it's been a blast as always. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Thank you for everyone who submitted the exams, and please do feel free to write to the people who did your exam and just say a word of acknowledgement or thanks. And I know that that would be greatly appreciated on behalf of the teachers. We often really put, sometimes we worry about these, like, are we saying the right thing? Am I being clear enough? Or, so it's not so much of a, to make them feel good about themselves. It's really just, it's when you put a lot of effort into something, you want to know it's been received and heard and understood. So that would be greatly appreciated. All right, looks like there's lots of yeses about video. So I'll do that next Tuesday. No problem. Thanks, everyone. And I will take into account, if I can, better, although it's kind of like a whole nother viewpoint. This was just kind of an overview. I will take into account the idea of applying this to submission type videos or duets. But this just was, pun intended, piquing your interest. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye.